Hello and welcome back to the Wheelknowers Formula One podcast. We're back after a long break. Just getting back from the winter break, headed into a new season, new regulations, a lot of new stuff to break down and talk about. First off, though, Sam, how are you? How did you enjoy your break and then testing as well, which I know will be the heavy part of what we'll talk about today?
I'm doing great. I mean, it was a great winter, great to get away from everything for a little bit and just enjoy some other sports, other activities. But man, I'm excited to get back into F1. There's a lot to talk about: a new season, new regulations, new teams, a new driver. So much to get into, and I can't wait to get into it with you.
Yeah, like you said, we got a whole heck of a lot to break down. I think we'll start off with everything from testing though, and the big talk from that being, of course, the new regulations and how that was all playing out with the drivers, how they were feeling with it early on. Uh, I think the big takeaway from that as well was the issues with the energy management system. Was it creating good racing? You had guys like Max Verstappen saying the new regulations were anti-racing. They felt like a Formula E car on steroids. You had Lewis Hamilton saying that you need a degree pretty much to understand how to drive these cars. He didn't really mention what degree. I don't think a business degree is going to get it done, though. I don't think that's what he was talking about. I have a degree. Don't think I'm going to understand it. And then you had Fernando Alonso as well, saying his chef could drive the car. The team chef could drive the car because you're just coming into the corners so much slower with the new energy management stuff. So a lot of talk from the drivers. We see this in every year with testing. A lot of negativity, I feel like, around, our car is not that great, or the car in general is not that great. But with the new regulations, it felt like it was all kind of amped up a little bit more this year.
Yeah, I mean, a business degree might not get it done, but if Alonso's chef can do it, a culinary degree might do just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road here. I do think eventually they'll work it out. I mean, these teams are smart enough. It's the most engineering brain power pretty much anywhere in the world. I think they'll find solutions, but
Hmm.
there's going to be some issues. These first few races, even probably the first half of the season, maybe even the whole season, they might have to wait. The FIA might have to wait until next year to unveil not fully new regulations, but some modified regulations here. Maybe make the battery a little less involved. Maybe try some different stuff. Maybe the new DRS aero system doesn't work out. But for me, I think this season is going to come down to who can make the most out of a bad situation, who can adapt, who can figure out all the loopholes. And we've already seen that in testing. We'll get into a little bit later. We've seen the Mercedes engine. We've seen the Ferrari wing and other teams as well with their wings. I think it's just been fascinating to watch these teams adapt, and we're going to see how the racing turns out. But have been excited to see the innovation in F1 to adapt to what could be a rocky start.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes F1 what it is. It's kind of an engineering sort of series as well as a driving series. I know we had some comments about that circulating around the news as well. But it is, design and car design is a big part of it. And yeah, these new regs are just kind of exacerbating all that. Yeah, I guess the part that really kind of worried me from testing was you had a video where it was Hadjar. He was trying to make an overtake on Bottas in the Cadillac, and Hadjar's going down the straight. He runs out of energy mid straight. At this point, he's side by side with the Cadillac, and he has to drop back behind because he ran out of energy, didn't have anything left. And then Bottas later on down the straight also runs out of energy. So then eventually, Hadjar is able to make the move, but it just worries me because I don't want F1 to become kind of gimmicky and like a gimmicky style of racing. And I do have that fear with this energy management that it may be that way, especially early on. But I think that we'll be able to get all this figured out later on in these regulations, because you're right, they have the best engineers in the world, and they're able to kind of adapt and make the best out of whatever they're given if you give them enough time. So I think we'll get this stuff figured out, but it might take a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money at stake too, right? You got ratings could tank if the racing's not good. You
Yeah.
could see the likes of Max and Lewis more likely to leave. Alonso as well, especially with the Aston Martin situation. So it's going to be in the best interest of F1 to get this settled as soon as possible, and I think they'll be able to do so. It's not going to be race one, I doubt it. Probably won't even be maybe till summer break, but I think they'll get it figured out, get it sorted, and we're going to get some good racing with these regs sooner or later. It's going to improve a little bit.
Yeah, I do expect it to eventually get better. I think it's gonna take a little bit of time, and who knows, it might even come out of the gates and be pretty okay, or just the racing in general with this energy management system the way it is right now might actually turn out to be really good. You just never know until testing's over. It's just one of those things. Um, but I think between that video and then the drivers voicing their concerns is the areas where I get a little uneasy about it. um, but at the same time, we've heard those same kind of concerns come out of testing before, and everything turns out to be pretty okay. So you take everything with a grain of salt as it is in testing in general, and I think that this is just another one of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And drivers are going to air out their concerns because now is the time to do so. There's still time to make some slight tweaks, make some changes, and
Hmm.
get the car in the best shape possible before race number one. It does sound like a more widespread thing. I know that I've seen people talking about how Max and Lewis are sort of getting out there and making their voices heard because the lower drivers on the grid maybe don't feel like they have the same cachet and they're kind
Hmm.
of leading the charge. So I do think overall there's some serious concern from the drivers and not just those three. But I think that it'll work itself out. It might be big gaps at first. It might be some confusing racing things we're not used to, but we'll see. We'll see how the changes come. We'll see which new parts of these regs get lifted back. We'll see which ones they push forward on, and I think we're going to get a recipe figured out here sooner or later.
Yeah, I think the other big thing from testing and what was talked about the most regulation wise was the starts and how everything was unfolding there. You had some cars, the Ferrari powered cars mostly, that were able to get great starts, and then you had some of the other cars that were really struggling off the line, and things could get out of hand a little bit if we're not able to figure that out come Australia. What do you expect come that first race in Australia? Uh, when we talk about these start procedures, because right now it is a little bit worrying for some of the teams that like Mercedes and Red Bull to an extent, Audi as well. Some of these other engine manufacturers other than Ferrari that are really struggling off the line.
Yeah, I think this whole start procedure is fascinating. I think that, I mean, you look at this Ferrari advantage. I think that's going to be one of the key storylines of these first few races. Is that advantage really as big as it is? And I don't think it's as big as it seems to be in some of these procedure videos, but it is certainly not nothing. I mean, other teams lobbying to change the start procedure to maybe give them more time to benefit them, but Ferrari came prepared on this and some other stuff too. I got to give them credit. We'll see how their pace compares to the likes of Mercedes and some of the other top teams, but Ferrari came ready on this start procedure, and I think that at the end of the day, this isn't a safety thing unless there's some total disaster pile up. I think as long as half the grid doesn't go into anti-stall or something, I think we're going to be okay.
Mhm.
I think what it comes down to is how much of a competitive advantage can this be for Ferrari? Is this a competitive advantage? I know that McLaren looked a little bit better at the end with their starts and such, so maybe we're overblowing it a little bit, but I do think that this could be. It's not nothing, and every little advantage matters with these new regs. You never know what could be a massive deal and what could be a nothing burger. So yeah, we'll see kind of how that carries over in Australia. It's probably the part of the race I'm most looking forward to is just seeing how everyone gets off the blocks. But for me, I do think there's some advantage right now for Ferrari, and that could be the difference if they don't have poor qualifying pace, but they can make that up at the start line. I think that's a massive, massive deal.
Yeah, I think we're going to see just a starting procedure content extravaganza, just a blowout of content from FP1, FP2, FP3 on the starting procedure stuff, because it is, it's been one of the big talks coming away from testing. And I just think that it's just going to blow up into a huge deal until we see it for the first time on track, because you might see some cars, like some of the Ferrari powered cars that won't be near the front, like Cadillac or Haas, get really crazy starts all the way from the back of the grid and end up from like P18 to P11, after the first lap, just because of the start. And then, obviously how that'll play out from there in the race is going to be wild to watch. If it is as big as we think it is, I'm not sure that it'll, just like with everything else we've talked about so far, you don't know how much to take from testing, but it could be a big deal. And I think we'll see a lot of, the Mercedes didn't look good on the practice jump at the end of FP2. Should we be really worried for the race? I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was texting you in a group the other day, and we were talking about this, and I said this is our chance for Cadillac to get good points.
Yeah.
If you get up to P5 and P6 by the end of the first lap, you got the Minister of Defense on your team. You're
Yeah.
pretty set. You're going to end up with solid points. So this is our one hope left for Cadillac, is that the Ferrari engine will provide some starting spark. But yeah, I think we're going to find out real quick, obviously, how this plays out. And yeah, this could be the deal breaker for these teams if they can't get it figured out quickly. I know it seems like some teams are closer than others and some are totally lost in the wilderness. So we're going to see how this goes in Melbourne, but it could be, it could really blow the whole thing open.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much the Minister of Defense is going to really be able to help if we're, Cadillac's 2-3 seconds off the pace a lap like we were seeing in qualifying. I'm not sure he's going to be able to make the new smaller car wide enough to do anything about it. But we can hope, right?
If him and Botas block together, you think they could take up enough of the track?
They just run the same lap time, just side by side, the whole lap, just to block. I think that'd be sick.
Yeah, they need to keep what they need to do is keep the start advantage hopefully until Monaco, and then they can hop like 10 spots at the start, 15 spots, and then just clog up the track the whole way.
That's some like F1 movie plan C for combat kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking for. That's what we need from Cadillac.
That should be the team motto. They should have adopted that. It should be on the social media posts and on the wall in the factory and everything. Plan C for combat.
I mean, they got like the same Apex GP colors and everything.
Yeah, and the name starts with a C, Cadillac. It's Plan C. There you go.
Plan C for Cadillac. Yeah, that it's going to be interesting to watch how all that pans out, certainly. At the race start in Australia. And another thing that's really interesting to watch, obviously a little bit regulation based, but more team based. One of the big things that came out of testing was Aston Martin and their issues. I mean, it does not look good right now, Sam. We might see a Fernando Alonso retirement mid-season. If this continues, we might see Lance Stroll just decide, you know what, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. Just sell the team because it does not look good. I mean, they're the only Honda powered car. There's nothing else to really go off other than their own data, and their own data has given them 6 laps on the final day of testing. When you had like 8 hours of worth of testing to go off of, they get 6 laps in. Uh, I'm seeing a lot of people worried they might not even finish a race for a little while. Yeah, it feels like it might be a guaranteed yellow flag at some point for a stranded Aston Martin car on the side of the road in Melbourne. Then the other teams might have to factor that into their strategy coming up for the race.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to see where these Aston Martin drivers are going to take this season. I mean, the car's in such worse shape than I realized. I think when I first saw how bad it was and heard about it, I think my first instinct was to think, well, Honda's just really let them down with the engine, and Newey couldn't have done anything wrong. He's Adrian Newey, and now it sounds like the problems are much worse. You got gearbox issues, you got all kinds of issues,
Do you think
and
it's mostly a car like a car design thing from Newey, or do you think it's more of a Honda engine issue, or do you think it's just a big mix of both?
I think it's both. I mean, I think if I would lean more one way, it's Honda. Obviously, I don't know all the details sitting here from home. We research as much as we can, but there's only so
Hmm.
much that gets released to us. But based off what I've seen so far, it seems to be mostly Honda, but there's still certainly some other design issues with the car as well. I mean, for them to be they're dead last in times. They only did about half the laps that everybody else did in testing, down with 334, and Cadillac's the only other team that did less than 700, and they still did 586, so much
Yeah.
more than the 334. They ran 6 laps on the final day, which was apparently the plan. Like, their goal was to do 6 laps, and none of them were time lapse, and I don't really understand that, but
Were
I
they
am.
just like, hey, let's just make sure the car is like we can turn it on?
Yeah, I guess maybe they were like, let's try one thing and just see if the car runs. I don't know, but
Yeah.
considering they didn't even finish a full race sim, I believe it's really shocking. But I'm interested to see, to get to your point about the drivers, as these DNFs rack up, how they react to it. The Alonso radios we get, the Stroll. I feel like Stroll is going to start tweeting like LeBron or something. Like, he's just gonna like it's
Just cryptic tweets.
yeah, like just a kid from Montreal. Like, hashtag washed king. Like, he's gonna
Yeah.
he's gonna start doing like a old man retirement tour or something. And all the drivers are going to gift him new paddle sets or something, and then he's going to head out the door. I mean, it's pretty shocking right now, and I don't see it getting much better anytime soon.
Yeah, gosh, that'd be something. That is the main thing. I'm like, where is this gonna go with the drivers? I mean, is Lance gonna be like I'm done. Let's just. I mean, Dad, you can keep the team if you want it. That's totally up to you. But I'm good. I do not need this anymore. And then for not Fernando, it's like, I mean, at this point, it's it kind of felt like this season was now or never, anyways. For him, just with his age, I mean, he could last forever. I mean, he could still be on. He could get a 50th birthday post from F1 and be on the grid the next day, and I wouldn't be shocked. But it does feel like everything we heard coming, in this offseason coming into this year was about this season being huge just in terms of where he's going to head for the future, and if the car is in such bad shape they can't even finish the race, then I don't see that being good for him, future wise.
Yeah, I think kind of a hot take I have, just because I haven't really seen it many other places, if anywhere, is I wonder if Alonso just has nothing to work with this season, but he's still hungry to kind of prove himself, not to prove himself. He's obviously proven himself,
Hmm.
but he's still hungry to do it one more time. I wonder if one of the top teams would look at bringing him on for a year, say, just as a flyer.
Hmm.
There's so many drivers that are out of a contract after 2026. Maybe say Antonelli has a bad year and Mercedes decides he needs more development. They send him to wherever other team. They bring in Alonso for the year, or
Could you
say,
imagine the content coming out of Mercedes, George Russell and Fernando Alonso as teammates?
I know
Oh my gosh.
they're boys too. They're
Yeah.
good buddies. So
Yeah.
that would be a great time. But no, something like that, or I don't. Red Bull gets tired of trying out the second drivers, or maybe they have two seats open after this season. If
Yeah.
Max and they're just like,
Max hates it.
come on, we
Yeah.
have bring in Fernando for a year, or the doomsday scenario is him reuniting with Ferrari and Ferrari lets him down again. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you never know. I don't think that will happen, but everything's going to be on the table after this if this goes the way we think it's going to go because there's just so much to fix. I think they could get to a point where they're finishing races competitively, like, maybe they get to around the midfield or something at some point, but there's so much to fix and so far to get there that I wonder if the mountain's just too steep to climb, and it's going to be fascinating to see where all the chips fall after this season if that happens because like you said, we could see Lance leave. We could see Fernando retire or leave. We could see, the team change ownership. Lawrence decides he's done. We could see Newey potentially back on the market.
Yeah.
So we've still got a long way to go before all that happens. I just think the car is in such dire straits right now that you can't project you just can't project anything good for them at this point.
But yeah, for Fernando, it's kind of a weird position for him, right? Because like if getting from where they are to getting to the midfield by the end of the year may be a huge achievement just for Aston Martin as a team moving forward, but I don't think that that's even enough to convince Fernando to stay along for another year or two. Just with that level of growth, I feel like he needed to be in a place to continue on after the season where he's fighting for at least podiums, and I just don't see that being a reality at this point. So it's kind of like I feel like he might feel already just completely lost before it's even started at this point.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I'm at. It's just such a lost cause. And we'll see. Maybe they show up to Australia and some things are fixed and they can at least finish the race in somewhat respectable time. But it's a big mountain to climb and a lot of chips left to fall if it doesn't work out. So I think that's one of the most fascinating stories of the season. I think going in, one of my big takes going to be going into this season was that I thought there was going to be some shakeup with the top teams and that we are going to see some teams that were formerly in the midfield fighting up there with the top teams. And the obvious number one candidate, or at least one of the top three in my mind, was Aston Martin.
Hmm.
And it's not only are they not in the midfield, they're not even. I mean, they're barely in the bottom field with
Yeah.
Cadillac. Like it's just those two down there, and Aston Martin looks even worse right now. So yeah, it's just gone all wrong, and we'll see how quickly they can get it turned around. But I think it's maybe the most fascinating story of the offseason from a team standpoint is how far they've fallen in such a short amount of time when this was supposed to be the season where they climbed closer to the top.
It's so bizarre because, like you said, we were expecting them to be one of the teams that might be able to punch above their weight and mix it up with those top four. And now they're so far gone. You question like if they're even going to score a point this year. And you think there's development to be had. Honda put out a good engine in the previous generation, Adrian Newey, we know what he can do. So there's a lot of still positives there, but at the same time, it is very worrying, uh, just with how bad it is right now. That makes you question like when or if they'll even score a point this year.
Yeah, and it was a bizarre timeline for Honda. Their engine was struggling, and then they decide they're going to leave F1, and then all of a sudden they're winning titles with Red Bull, and then they decide to jump back in, and I think that might have cost them some development time, and some brain drain as well, and you lose a lot of key pieces there. There is obviously the relationship pre-established with Nui, but
Mhm.
it hasn't been enough to overcome what's been a disaster preseason for them.
Yeah, no, it's really bad right now. And you brought this up a little bit ago, just kind of barely touched on it, but with Max Verstappen and his future, and I brought it up at the top as well, some of the quotes that he had about the racing in this generation. But he's had even more interviews since then, pretty much just outright saying like, I'm good to retire like whenever. Like I've already achieved enough. I don't really need to prove anything to anybody. So it's more just me doing this for the enjoyment of it than any. I mean, obviously, he's one of the most competitive people in all of sports, but he doesn't really need it in that sense for himself right now. It's more of he's doing it because he enjoys it. And if this car isn't able to give him, the ability to enjoy the sport anymore, you just wonder how much longer he will stay in, and uh, you know, how long do you think he has left in F1 if this car continues down the path that it's going? Because Max has made it pretty clear he does not like the way that this thing is heading.
Yeah, look, I mean, I believe him when he says that he doesn't have much time left, but I think there's a difference between him retiring for maybe a couple years and him retiring permanently. I don't think that he would retire permanently so young. I know he got started very young in F1 and has already accomplished so much, but these guys, especially a guy with his level of racing drive, I just don't see him giving that up. I could certainly see him, especially if Red Bull's not competitive this year, if they're maybe the third or fourth best car and it's a struggle to be on the podium, let alone win races. I could see him saying, you know what, I'm going to take 2-3 years and go do all these other races that, he's got so many other series and interests. He's got his own team that I believe GT racing. So he's got a million different things he could do. He's talked about spending time with family, having a young daughter and everything. So I think for me, I believe him. I just don't know if he would stay retired forever. And I think it depends on this car too. Like I said, if it's not going well, I could see it being accelerated. I could even see after this season. But if he's winning races and competing for titles, let alone winning them, I don't think he's going to leave quite yet. I think his desire to win, his hunger to win, if he has a chance to win, I think he'll stick around. And even if he doesn't care, genuinely doesn't care about the championships or the race wins or whatever records, if he has a chance to win, I think he has enough competitive desire to stick around and deal with whatever misgivings he has about the car or about anything else going on in F1.
But yeah, I'm not sure how much Max actually really does care about those titles and total number of wins long term. But we all know how competitive he is, and I think he does care about like, you know, you set a race from him in 2 weeks, and he's gonna care very very deeply about going out and winning that race, more for like the enjoyment and the fulfillment of it in the moment rather than even anything to do with like historical, like, oh, Max is on the Mount Rushmore of F1 drivers or whatever. um so I think he'll always have that, that fire and that drive to just race whatever he wants to race. um and yeah, whether that is, a continued F1 presence for a long time if he's enjoying the driving or somewhere else. I don't expect to see him to just disappear when he retires, but he could also do something like we were just talking about Fernando. Fernando retired for a little bit, came back. You've seen other legends of the sport do that, so I wouldn't rule that out either. If he just does not like these regs, to leave, and then when new regs come back, maybe try it out again, or if these regs get better by the end of it, come back and race as well. I really wouldn't put anything off the table for Max at this point.
Yeah, the good news for Max is I did see the other day F1's trying to get more back into uh, racing, like actual racing circuits, for lack of a better term. At least off the top of my head, instead of street circuits, they're trying to get back to some. They got Turkey. Looks
Hmm.
like it's probably coming back in Portugal as well on the table. So, yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, Max would have so much freedom without F1 that he could go in and
Hmm.
just he could go do Le Mans and go do a couple other endurance races and maybe some GT races and not be tied to even a full season if he wanted to, a full season
Yeah.
schedule. It is a shame. I think Red Bull was doing a social thing with him, and they were talking about which series he'd want to try, and he didn't seem to be that interested in NASCAR or IndyCar, which was disappointing. I know he said before he didn't want to do the Indy 500, but I
Hmm.
would love to see him in NASCAR for one race. That would be either see him at like a Coda or see him the total opposite, like doing Daytona or something. Would have been
Yeah.
so much fun. But yeah, it still would be cool to see him outside of the F1 environment. I would miss having him certainly, and it would feel kind of like certainly it wouldn't feel like the championship was empty or anything without him, but it would be like kind of a looming shadow of the best driver in the world is not in F1 anymore, and that would
Yeah.
be harmful for the series for sure.
Yeah, I going into that NASCAR IndyCar thing. I think I could see him doing a NASCAR race way more than an IndyCar race, just because NASCAR is such a different thing to drive than like an IndyCar compared to an F1 car. Uh, I'm not saying that IndyCar is a step down from F1 because I love IndyCar, just as much as F1, but to him that might feel kind of like a step down, or a step in a lower direction, whereas NASCAR would just be, oh, I'm trying something completely different. So I think I could see a NASCAR seat, trying that out way more than IndyCar. But we're gonna see him do the GT and the endurance stuff. We're gonna see him do Le Mans. We're gonna see him do, hopefully for our case, the Rolex, because we get to go to that event, and I'd love to see him do that. Some of the other biggest endurance races in the world, he's going to try those. So no matter what happens when he steps away from F1, he's still going to be doing high level racing. And I think that doing the endurance kind of thing gives him that, not for lack of a better term, like work life balance of, oh, I still get to spend a ton of time with my family, but I also get to get my competitive itch doing the biggest endurance races in the world, and ones that are still very historic in their own way.
Yeah, I think I just had this idea on the spot, but this is something they've alluded to in the past in a way. I've would love to see them if there is a mass exodus after this year, if a few of the top guys, your Max, your Fernando, your Lewis say, I don't like these regs, it's not working, I'm done. I would love to see a team up and they go do Daytona.
Hmm.
By that I mean 24 hours Daytona.
Yeah.
They go do Le Mans. They go do some other 12 and 24-hour endurance races. They can kind of set their own schedule and
Yeah.
they just do a world tour. I know Lewis hasn't really expressed interest in that as much, but if you get Max Fernando, and then I think they talked about doing it with Vettel potentially,
I
or
was
they've
gonna
talked
say
about it
get
with
sub.
or they talked about Robert Kubica in the past and
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
couple other guys. Really anybody they could bring on as a third driver, and I would watch every race. I mean, I already watch
Hmm.
a good
Yeah.
bit of those, especially Daytona because we go usually. But man, doing that that would almost make it worth it, like to not have those guys in F1 anymore because that would be so fun.
Yeah. Seeing guys, like Fernando, like Vettel. Vettel's already, to his retirement from F1, but guys that are already very close to retiring. I know Max is a much bigger age gap to Fernando, but he's, made it pretty clear at this point that he's at least within a few years away from retiring. Uh, so yeah, getting those guys who are close to that age, or who have already retired from F1, getting them together for a world tour, like you said, of doing some of the biggest endurance GT races and stuff like that. Sign me up. I'm all there for that, and I just think that'd be a great thing for motorsports in general to see those guys take on kind of a different type of test, and travel the world doing something like that. Yeah, I could totally see that from Max. Um, Another big takeaway from the testing was the Ferrari rear wing. I think that definitely caught some eyeballs. Um, and then Alpine and Audi as well have a different take on the active aero system, but the Ferrari one is the biggest standout, definitely. Among those, what do you make of those changes? Do you think that they'll provide anything huge for Ferrari? Because I feel like Ferrari have come out of the gate swinging in these new regs. It was all talk of Mercedes and that compression ratio and them, having that advantage. But now through testing, you look at Ferrari, that rear wing innovation is just insane. It's so smart. And then you look at their race starts as well. They've seemingly nailed that. So it seems like Ferrari have started way more in the right direction than I was certainly expecting from them in this new reg set.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this whole Ferrari wing change, and also what Alpine and then Audi as well are doing, sort of copying Alpine, but just this whole wing fiasco, I think is just it's such like a it's fascinatingly unique in F1,
Hmm.
where it just
Yeah.
seems like such a simple idea. Like, instead of flipping the wing open this way, what if we flipped it the other way?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like
Yeah.
that's something that you try, like, in a garage with your buddies or something, or
I like
like,
to think that's how that conversation started of what if we just flipped it upside down?
yeah, yeah, and it's like these guys are, like we said earlier, they're the best engineers in the
Yeah.
world, very handsomely paid, and these like awesome factories, and this is sort of how they deal with things. I think it's just so cool to see innovation like this, whether it's the most basic stuff or the most hardcore extreme stuff that you're going to find. And I'm wondering too if we're going to get more innovation in this era with the active arrow than with we had with DRS, maybe with the two separate wings and uh, a rewriting of the rules, I guess. This maybe was something, I don't know the specifics, but maybe when it was DRS specific, it was more they were more specific within the rules about how the wing was supposed to open, because they talked about this, that there was nothing written in the rules that like the wing had to
Mhm.
specifically open this way, and that's how they had the idea to try this. So I think for me, I think it's going to work. I don't know if it's going to be like the thing that decides the championship or anything, but it does look like it's going to work, and I think it's exciting because I think anytime there's innovation in F1, it's the same way I feel about the Mercedes engine thing. I think they did a great job developing that engine, and they deserve to be rewarded for their innovation. Anything that's not putting safety at risk and can make the car faster,
Mhm.
deserves to be rewarded. So, yeah, I'm just excited to see all the innovation in this era, and I think Ferrari right now, between what we're seeing at the starts and with this rear wing as well, I think they're, believe it or not, at the peak of it at the moment.
Yeah, Ferrari have impressed me the most of anybody so far in testing with these innovations, from the rear wing to the race starts. And you also take into account they added a tiny wing, like a tiny wing to add downforce as well. uh, just above the exhaust pipe. So they're going to get a little bit extra downforce to help them out in the corners, but then on the straights they have the lift that will allow them just to even more speed down the straights. I feel like they're really impressing me with these new regs. How they've managed to go about it way more than anybody else in the grid. They're taking the risks. They're pushing, and it seems like it's only testing. We don't know the full extent of where everybody's at, but it seems like the results are paying off for them. When you get these new regs, every time it's somebody takes a huge swing, and it usually pays off for them. Usually don't see it to like this level of whoa that really stands out. But in Ferrari's case here, they're taking really big swings, and all signs point to that it will pay off for them. Don't know where exactly it's going to place them, but Mercedes may have the advantage with just overall power with the compression ratio stuff, but Ferrari seemed to have an advantage a little bit aerodynamically and also with their engine in a different way with the race starts.
Yeah, we're actually, well, this is skipping a point in our document. We can come back to the other one, but just since we're talking about Mercedes and Ferrari, we were going to talk about which one we feel, or any other team as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that most people feel that those are the two favorites at the moment. Are those, which one are you leaning towards, or is there another team that's catching your eye? Kind of, what's your favorite looking like at the moment?
Well, I'm definitely leaning, one of those two, certainly. I think Ferrari has impressed me the most. I'm not sure that means they're the favorite in my eyes, like I was saying, just with all these innovations they're bringing to testing. But I feel like a team that everybody is not talking about is McLaren. And, they're coming off back to back constructors' championships. I think they're flying extremely under the radar right now. They have that same Mercedes engine advantage that Mercedes have. And, it's a completely different set of regulations, different rules, different way of going about things. But I think that McLaren are just kind of flying under the radar right now and testing, letting all the talk go to Ferrari and Mercedes. And I think that they'll be there to battle with, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull as well. But I just feel like they are flying under the radar. I didn't really answer your question there. I'm not sure exactly who I'd take. I think Ferrari right now, but that could change. It's all just guessing up in the wind at this point. Before testing, I would have said Mercedes. Now I'm leaning Ferrari, but I will watch out for McLaren as well.
Yeah, what's funny is I have had the same thought about McLaren. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I'm as high on them as you are. Like, I think for me, I think I have Mercedes ahead and then Ferrari slightly behind,
Mm-hmm.
and then McLaren probably behind them. McLaren and Red Bull, I guess,
Yeah.
close in 3, 4. But I had that same thought as far as nobody's talking about McLaren. This is the team that for the last year and a half, they've had by far the fastest car on a week to week basis. Yeah, they've had like Red Bull catch up at
Mm-hmm.
the end of last season and such, but like, they've dominated the constructors title last year. They won it the year before as well. I just think it's very odd to have the reigning dual champions slipping under the
Yeah.
radar as much as they are, and all this talk. I think a lot of the Mercedes confidence over McLaren just comes from the fact that now that we're out of the ground effect era, that's going to solve all of Mercedes problems,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it will solve a lot of them. I think that's kind of why I still lean towards them. Is just they've had so much momentum from what we've heard, like for
Yeah.
since the start of development on this car, and I didn't see anything during testing that would unseat them.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I think it's tough. I almost feel like if we talk about in other sports, like in football, it's like if you do remove the records or remove the team name and just look at the
Yeah.
records, and it's like the blind resume test. I feel like if you remove the Ferrari name, just
Mm-hmm.
I would almost feel more confident in them. It's just
Yeah.
not wanting to tempt fate there. I think what Ferrari has done. We mentioned the starting procedure work that they've done. We mentioned the wing, but I think another thing too is they've been incredibly durable throughout
Hmm.
testing between the three
Yeah.
cars. The engine's been very durable for Ferrari. Haas got in a ton of laps. They were the most
Yeah.
midfield teams by a decent bit laps wise. And then Cadillac as well didn't really have any, a lot of major engine issues. And they're a brand new outfit. So I think it's a lot of very good signs for Ferrari, even though I would still lean Mercedes. I do think it's going to be close. And honestly, from purely a fan perspective, I'm kind of hoping that's where the title fight goes this year too. So
Hmm.
maybe I'm biased, but I would love to see Russell against Leclerc and Hamilton,
Hmm.
maybe Antonelli in there too, but like Lewis against his old team, uh,
Yeah.
Leclerc and Russell fighting for a first title, Lewis fighting for his eighth. Kimmy, if he could somehow do it, would be, like I'm
Yeah.
sure he'd be the youngest champion ever. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm hoping for, but I also think that's the reality of I think what we're gonna get at least at the moment.
Yeah, I hope that that's the way this thing goes. Like you said, also, it's been Red Bull McLaren for the past kind of 2, 3 years now. Not that there's anything wrong with the way that that title fight went down, and I'd still love to see Max getting involved. I'd love to see getting Lando and Oscar getting involved as well. But it would be nice to see, two different teams kind of battle for the title after the past 2 years where it's been McLaren and Red Bull. So from that side of things as well, seeing those two battle it out would be great. And I think it will come down to right now. I feel like it's Ferrari and Mercedes, but with these new regs, I mean, someone could catch something mid-season, and as long as they're not too far behind, as long as McLaren or Red Bull are sticking around, they're still going to be there in the end. Maybe challenging for the title. So it's a really hard question to ask who the favorite for the constructors is right now, because it's maybe the most open it's ever been, because these are the biggest regulation changes ever. Uh, but I would lean Ferrari or Mercedes at the moment, just what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the hardest predictions that we've ever done, which,
Yeah,
kind of a teaser to try and do a predictions episode
yeah,
before the season starts. I think it's going to be so fascinating
oh yeah,
to see where we have everyone. I think midfield, we're talking about the front right now, but midfield, there's going to be some massive variation. And it's
hmm,
kind of tough to differentiate a lot of those teams from one another. So, yeah, it's just you're you know taking all the cards and tossing them out and reshuffling the deck, and I think that's exciting. Even if I thought we might get a little more shuffling at the top, we might get some new teams in there. It doesn't look like it. The top four seem to have a pretty significant lead on the rest of the field, but it's still going to be some fun, and I'm thrilled to see how this shakes out. I'm hoping. I think the top four is close enough to where we might get a season like we had in 2024, where there was a lot of different winners.
hmm,
I think there were 7 different winners that year. That would be great for the sport if we got
yeah.
another year like that. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Who knows how it'll pan out? It could be one team wins 20 races, or it could be 4 or 5 teams win a race and we get an all-time great season.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's so open, and we're just, I like you said, teasing that prediction episode. It's gonna be. I was just thinking about it, going through it in my head. I'm like, man, I don't even know where to start with this. Uh, let's move on and do a little bit of Cadillac talk. We are, of course, the foremost Cadillac F1 podcast out there. Uh, are we worried after testing? I mean, things didn't necessarily look great. Like you said, they got a lot of running in. That's always a good sign, especially for a completely new team to get plenty of running in, just get those laps under their belt. But time wise, it didn't necessarily look great. So are we worried after what we've seen from testing, or is it kind of just what we probably should expect for a first year team?
Yeah, I know I'm wearing a McLaren hoodie today, but my Cadillac stuff's going to be on the way real soon. I wish they dropped the merch a little bit earlier, but It is what it
Speaking of
is.
that, I got a Botas. I got my Botas shirt, but my Perez hat is delayed like 2 months now. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a tough beat.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, for me, I was pretty pleased with their testing, but that was mostly just out of the car looking durable. Like they got,
Hmm.
I believe, almost 600 laps. Yeah, it was 586 laps. The timing certainly wasn't great. Other than Aston Martin, they're like almost a full second off the rest of the field as far as fastest lap. So that is certainly not ideal. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to rack up points or podiums or whatever this season. I think that they've certainly got a long way to go. But I think step number one is being reliable and consistent. And I think the car showed that it can be that in this test. And now you can look to find the pace from here. And I do think that they are going to score a couple points this season. And I mean, it might just be a couple. It might be like a 2 10th place finishes or a 10th and a ninth or something. But I think they're going to find a way to squeeze something out. I think those drivers are just, yeah, they were both second drivers for a good bit of their careers, but those guys are legit. They're race winners. They've proven it in cars that aren't the best cars on the grid. Perez winning race a racing point. Like I know they were good that season, but I mean, these guys have the juice enough to scavenge some points in the same way that we've seen like a Hulkenberg scavenge points out of really bad cars these last couple seasons. I think there's going to be one or two circuits that just fit them well enough, and we get a good enough drive out of one of those guys to maybe squeeze in a 10th or a ninth, and then there will be parades in the streets.
Yeah, McLaren last year, they may have had a number one driver problem. I think Cadillac's going to have a number two driver problem. We have the foremost number two drivers on the grid battling it out. There can only be one number two driver. We're going to figure that out this year. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited for is the number two driver battle between Bottas and Perez. Who are they going to make number one? I mean, I guess they don't have to make someone number one. They could both be number two drivers. Neither of them gets the preferable strategy. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But uh, yeah, I think, all joking aside, their drivers do have plenty of experience under their belt. We've seen them both have great drives in the past. I'm not really worried about the drivers. I think that they, getting two veterans was a great move from Cadillac in their first season. Just bringing in that experience, I think, will only be beneficial. Um, and yeah, I mean, obviously, look, you hope for like a Braun GP kind of thing, right? Where they come in and they just sweep the nation and sweep the world off their feet, and it's just like, wow, this is an insane story. But in reality, that's probably not what was ever going to happen here. Um, Getting a ton of time in and testing, I think, is great. I think that's kind of the goal for this year is just get your feet wet, get your feet under you, and then really go from there and just build and build until they bring in their own engines, and we get GM even more involved, and then maybe this thing takes off to something huge. But yeah, I mean, you look at the times. Of course, you're worried after testing, uh, but it's kind of like, what are you even worried about? What are you exactly expecting from this season? And I think it's just have the durability, have the reliability, just get closer and closer incrementally as the season goes on. And I think that's all you're looking for.
Yeah, it would be very funny after all the accusations of sandbagging across the grid if Cadillac were the ones that were really sandbagging. They were the ones holding back the pace all along.
I
But
mean, looking at it, I don't think they ever really did like a true quali run,
mhm.
which is one of the things that has given me a little bit of hope. Uh, it was mostly kind of long run stuff and just getting their feet under them. So I don't think we've seen their true pace yet, but I also don't know if that true pace is going to be like out of this world either.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, to your point about the drivers, I think hit a home run with this driver duo because,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, the number one thing this year is reliability and consistency, keeping the car on track. And like I said, when they signed them, I
Mhm.
think these guys are the perfect duo for that. They're both smart behind the wheel, very capable. I think they very easily could have came in this year, and they could have maybe found the super license points for Herta, or they could have brought in some other rookies, and it could have been a disaster. But
Mhm.
I think with those two guys at the helm, like I said, they're going to scavenge a couple points and navigate their way around this season respectably, even if it's not a season full of glory. There's going to be some down weekends for sure, but those 1 or 2 points runs will make it all worth it.
Unless we get Plan C for Cadillac,
Yeah, exactly.
then every race might be might be points extravaganza for Cadillac. We'll see.
Yeah, or we get the turbocharged starts, like
Yeah,
when you hit the a nitrous button on a Fast and Furious game, and it just shoots you off.
they're going to be lined up back row of the grid, and they're just going to be like top five in the middle of the first lap.
That's the goal. That's what we're here for. I'm gonna be disappointed if it doesn't happen in Australia.
Yeah, let's not get our expectations too far, but I do love that you have them getting some points. I'm hoping for that, but we'll see. You had livery talk on here. Is there, as the last thing on our agenda, is there anything you really wanted to say about the liveries for this year, whether it be Cadillac or I know their two sided kind of car was definitely caught some eyes. Red Bull maybe bringing back their kind of older color. Uh, Anything that you really wanted to point out here?
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of these are a few weeks old now, and there's plenty of other places that have already done deep dives into the
Mhm.
livery. So we don't have to sit here and talk for hours about them, but just to cover them, to highlight a couple of favorites maybe that we had, or maybe ones that we didn't like as much. I think for me. My number one favorite, I think, is Haas right now. I think that is a beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful livery, a combination of the American and Japanese of
Mhm.
the team with the
Yeah.
white and red, and it's just the with hint of black too. I think it's gorgeous. It's most years I felt pretty middling with their liveries. They've been fine, but not spectacular. But this one looks really, really sleek. And then out of the top teams, you're right. The Red Bull one is one that blows me away. It's they're almost created on a curve because they've done so little in the last era that it's like them doing anything. It just makes me so excited. But the way that lighter shade of blue it just glistens off the car, you see it on the days where it's cloudy. You look at it and go, "Oh, it's kind of the same car." But when it's in the
Mhm.
sunlight or maybe some of those night races, it's just going to glisten and it's going to be gorgeous. So pretty thrilled about that. Also, like the Cadillac one, I mean, I mentioned to you before it got unveiled that a black and white one could look really nice. And it did. There's a lot of ways to make the black and white look very plain and like like a test car almost. But there's just enough room on there. Like there's enough sponsors, but not too many.
Mhm.
And I like the double sidedness of it. I think the more black side especially looks gorgeous. So
Mhm.
I think for me that one's a hit as well. So those are my top three. Uh, didn't know if you had any favorites or any ones that you really didn't like, or any thoughts from the livery reveals.
Yeah, I appreciate Cadillac trying something different with the two sided car. Like I said to you beforehand, I think I would have liked something with some color just in general. I think getting on the grid with like a that color that's Cadillac, that yellow or that blue, that's Cadillac. Um, but I in the end I do really like the livery that they came up with. Like you said, black and white done wrong could be really poor, but I think that they went a little off the rails and did something different, unique. I liked that. Um, The one that I really like, and I know that this is controversial, I really like the Audi. I think it kind of that red that they have, it just like it pops so well. I really enjoy that, and then it's just kind of like an older school style livery, and I always appreciate those. So I do like the Audi. I know some people really don't like it. It depends on what light you see it into. Sometimes it doesn't look as good. Sometimes it looks great. But I do enjoy the Audi. I thought it was one of the better ones, and I know some people didn't like it, but I just ended up liking it. That's my take on the Audi, and then the one I want to point out that I think stinks. Well, we all know Alpine hater here, number one Alpine hater. The Alpine was fine. I'm not going to say anything about the Alpine. It was okay. It's like the same car it's always been. But the Williams, I didn't like the Williams. I don't know what you thought about this year's Williams car. I when they unveiled that like new logo with like the new font and everything, I was really excited. I thought we were gonna get something great, and I was kind of just let down by it. Um, I like the light blue. I just don't think there was enough of it. I wish they would have gone kind of all one way or the other with that blue. Um, I just feel like there's too much going on and also like nothing going on in that livery, and I'm just not a fan of it. But yeah, those are just kind of the ones that I wanted to point out.
Yeah, I want to see a team really embrace that light blue, like the kind of
Yeah.
blue that I'm wearing right
Yep.
now. I think that
Hmm.
would be fantastic. I think as far as the Williams, I think it was fine. I don't think it was, one of their best efforts, but I also don't think it was terrible. I was just kind of like,
Hmm.
it's okay. Um, the Audi one is interesting to me. I think the Audi, I don't know. To me, maybe it's just the lighting, but I always see it like it looks more of an orange to me than a red, and it's
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of that mix. Yeah.
yeah, because like I'm looking at it right now as like a Reddit image of it, and it looks orange on the car, but then it looks red on like the outline, like it's.
Hmm.
But um, yeah, I mean, I like their creativity. I think it just doesn't hit my sensibilities, like, in general, I'm not big on, like, a gray, silver kinda look
Yeah.
for, like,
Hmm.
this is a little different, like a car, but, like, jerseys and that kinda
Yeah.
stuff, like, it's just not really my color, but, um, I do appreciate that they went with something a little bit different. I like that the car is pretty minimal on sponsors and everything.
Hmm.
So I don't think it was, like, maybe as bad as some people do, but that wasn't one that was, like, jumped out as a favorite for me.
I have to say the little yellow and green BP logo on
Mhm.
the backside, it does take it down a notch for me. I hate when teams get like sponsors that just don't match the color scheme at all.
Yeah.
And that's just one that when there isn't that many sponsors on the car, it really stands out. So that was a little bit of a tough hit for me when I saw that. But I just love that whatever it is, red, orange, that hot kind of popping red slash orange. It just really like catches my eye very well. Um, and I get what you're saying about the gray and black, but I think that red against that just makes it pop even more. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm probably in the minority on the Audi, but
Yeah, they called that problem with the colors the Ferrari problem with the, HP blue HP logo
yes,
against the red.
yes,
It doesn't work like that's not
hmm,
their identity. Uh, so yeah, that's unfortunate. Otherwise, I like the Ferrari.
me
Like,
too,
I like the
me
splash
too.
of white.
Yep, old
It's
school.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's a way to do something different while keeping the identity of the red, but
yeah,
yeah, just take that HP logo off and get any brand with red in it, basically.
or
And
black or white or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Just something that's not going to directly clash.
but the what is it, Mission Winnow or whatever it was, that was that
Yeah,
splash of like bright green
yeah.
from a few years ago.
Was Rich Energy red? No, they were like gold.
Yeah, they were
I
gold.
was like,
Yeah.
get them on the car, but
Yeah, we should. That Cadillac should have brought Rich Energy back. That would have been sweet.
Rich Energy Cadillac
Yeah,
F1 team.
yeah. Well, that'll wrap up everything that we have for this episode. We'll be back with some predictions before the season starts, and then it's smooth sailing from there. So, thank you guys for listening. We'll be back with plenty more, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.